Hi, I'm Bill Gates, host of the Outdoor Review, and today I have the absolute pleasure of having with me Sheriff John DeAugustini from El Dorado County, California. Very dear friend of mine, and also somebody that's obviously on the front lines when it comes to dealing with crime here in El Dorado County. I want to chat a little bit about some of the issues that we're facing today and things that perhaps we can maybe do a little bit better when it comes to trying to control crime on the streets. Sheriff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being our sheriff. You're doing a great job, and I'm
Thank
proud
you.
to say I live in El Dorado County, that's for sure. So thank you for that. Sheriff, as you know, I work down at the Capitol, and I'm constantly dealing with California State Legislature and the various laws that are being proposed, a ton of gun control laws that they're proposing, all under the guise that they're trying to reduce and minimize crime in California. But at the same time, I'm seeing laws passed all the time that, in my opinion, are increasing criminal violations here in California and frankly, putting more criminals out on the streets. So I want to chat with you a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You're going to get me going. So, yeah, absolutely, Bill. You can't, you say, trying to pass laws to help our public safety and make our streets safer and our community safer when exactly the opposite is true. Very, very, very few laws in the last, since I've been sheriff since January of 2011, have been passed that have been a pro public safety, about keeping our community safe. Right when I came in office in 2011, I was immediately hit with AB 109 realignment that went into effect, I believe it was October 31st of 2011. It realigned all non. So if you were or are convicted of a non-serious, non-violent, non-sex felony, of which they took a whole bunch of felonies and put them over in this other little category over here, you no longer serve your sentence in state prison. You served your sentence in county jail. County jails were designed to hold sentenced inmates for no more than a year. So it put a lot of burden on us, and it changed the entire classification system in our state prison system and in our county jails, which in the long run, the sole purpose of it was to reduce the population of state prison. And because of our inability to hold that many inmates in county jails, to reduce the population of inmates, period. That means more inmates, more knuckleheads in our communities. And then along in 2014, I believe it was, Prop 47 was presented to the voters as the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. The person that approves those ballot summaries and those ballot initiative names is our Attorney General, who at the time was Kamala Harris. And she approved that title and summary, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, which did absolutely nothing of the sort. We're hearing on the news daily about how a person can go into a store, and as long as they steal less than $950 worth of merchandise, it's a ticket. It's a misdemeanor. They walk out the door. It used to be $450 was a felony, and then we could and they were aggregable. So if they did it a couple times of $250, it was a felony, and we could charge them. We normally did if they went in with the intent. We can charge them with burglary. That is still on the books. However, no DA will touch it because it won't pass muster in the courtroom. So you have these folks that are literally walking in these doors. The first thing they steal is a calculator. They walk around, they steal $949.99 worth of stuff, and then they walk out.
What the heck does, what that proposition actually did have to do with safe neighborhoods and schools?
Nothing of the sort. The only reason that she was able to get away with that, and we tried to sue it, the people did, but it didn't, the court let it go, obviously, was because some of the money was going to go to help schools. Some of the money that was going to be saved by incarcerating these folks was going to be pumped back into our, supposedly back into our schools and into our communities for public safety, which never happens. Pennies on the dollar of what the actual cost is to our communities.
Well, and the funny thing is, because I'm one of those guys, and I'm sure you are as well, that when I get my voter pamphlet that lays out all the details as to what Proposition XYZ actually do, I read the whole darn thing, right? I'd be willing to bet that 95% of voters in this state and outside of California as well do nothing more than they read the title and they vote based on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe it's more than 95%. I think it's probably
right. Yeah.
950%. Yeah. Then a couple years later, they presented to the voters Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act, Prop 57. Again, nothing of the sort. Its sole purpose stated in the bill, if you'd have read the whole bill, not the title and summary, but if you'd have read the whole bill, the whole purpose was to reduce the state's prison population by another, I think, 10,000 inmates or something. We're just, they've closed Tracy, the Dual Vocational Institute in Tracy. They've closed that prison. They're closing Susanville, up in Susanville, High Desert State Prison. And the governor just said the other day in an open meeting, in a budget hearing, that he wants to close another, what was it, 2 or 3 prisons over the next couple of years. So where do those inmates go? Where do they go? They go into our communities. So if you have more knuckleheads in our communities, you have more crime. Bottom line.
And what is he doing this under the guise of, gee, we need to cut budget? Is that it? I mean, right now, because I work budget, I don't work the prison, related budget issues, but I work budget when it comes to wildlife and conservation and so forth. I'm very familiar with the fact that we had almost a record budget surplus this year. If we're ever going to cut budget, now is not the time that we should be rushing to judgment on putting more criminals on the street.
Exactly. And instead of spending it on bullet trains and handouts and free needles and crack pipes, and all of that, let's start spending it back on where it's needed in our communities by holding those that victimize our residents, our community members, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. They need to be in jail. They need to serve their time. And we need reasonable programming in our jails like we used to prior to Prop 47. A drug court was a really good diversion program. It worked. Somebody would get caught with a bunch of drugs. The courts, and it was their first offense, or maybe even their second offense, the courts could offer them diversion, say, hey, you go through this drug treatment, you go through this programming, everything else, you get clean. And instead of doing 2 or 5 years in prison, we'll grant you probation. You go through all this training, and if you're successful, you're free. And now these inmate, these folks that we arrest for large amounts of drugs, most of us now just a misdemeanor, but you arrest them and they say, well, the diversion program is still available, but what's my sentence? Well, 30 days. Oh, I'll do my sentence. I'm not going to do diversion. So they're not getting any of that treatment. It's not worth it to them.
Yeah, nobody's being rehabilitated before they get put back out on the streets.
No.
Right.
No, so it's a big snowball effect, and it's just going the wrong way.
So now let's take Susanville, for example. And I know that's just one of the several examples that you laid out just a few minutes ago. I'm very familiar with Susanville. I love that town. My son-in-law works out of Susanville for Cal Fire, right? I mean, great town, good hunting town. I've hunted up there before. I love it up there. But that's a prison town. I mean, when that prison shuts down, I don't know what's going to keep the economy of Susanville alive. It's like a college town. I mean, that prison is what keeps that town afloat.
Yep, it was a timber town, and then when timber went down to nothing, the prison was able to take off where that left off, and you're right. That's that town's industry, and when it's gone, who knows? It's not going to be good.
That's another impact. But let me ask you this: the intent is to spread those out to other prisons, send some to county jails. I mean, or just flat out put them on the street? What's the game plan?
Due to these decriminalization laws, their population is dropping, and they're justifying, that's how they're justifying the closure of these prisons. Well, we don't have the inmate population, so we're going to close prisons and save money. Well, county jails, sheriffs, we have a lot of their inmates, AB 109 inmates that are serving their long-term prison sentences here. Again, like I said before, they were only supposed to sit anything over a year sentence went to state prison. Now we have inmates 7, 8, 13, 14 years in the El Dorado County Jail. We're not set up for that. We're doing it. We're getting by. We're keeping the prison law office and the ACLU and everybody satisfied as best we can, because we know, everybody's ending up in court over issues in jails now. But they don't have the population. It justifies their closure.
Wanda and I have been personally impacted by this because back in, I think it was like 2012, right after they passed AB 109, she was going to Chico State. Our oldest daughter was going to Chico State, and she was in her room one night. She was head cheerleader, so she was always at cheer practice, and then she was doing homework late because she didn't get home until like 9 o'clock, right? So she was actually in her room and up in Chico, and she heard something banging on the wall outside her room in the next room. It was inside the house, and she thought, well, maybe it's my roommate. She goes, I'm going to get up and see what she's doing. It was like 2 a.m, right? Then she thought, no, I can't go out there. I got to get my homework done. I'm going to stay in here. So she stayed in her room, and then suddenly things quieted down. Next morning, she got up, and the house had been robbed.
Oh,
and they had taken her roommate's car. They had gone through all the drawers and everything else. Well, it turns out, she obviously called and reported that to the Chico police. Turns out that the same people went to another house that was down the street after they left her house. And when the guy did come out to confront him, he got stabbed. It's had a personal impact on my family, right? And when we questioned the police about, the suspects, they caught him. They caught him like the next day. The first thing they said was, these are people that should have been in jail. They had just been let out like the week before.
Yeah.
And they had no control over it. They had to let them go.
Yeah.
And they were every bit as frustrated about it, Sheriff, as you are about it as well.
And that's another direction we've been going. So the policies are changing in the state of California on what it takes to hold somebody in jail on an arrest. The no bail movement that's going around, the $0 bail, and then you have the whole evidence-based, quote unquote, evidence-based practices for evaluation of arrested individuals. So prior to just the last decade, when an individual was arrested, probation officers would make a report to the court after an interview, after a review of the reports and the case that they were in custody for. They would go and look at their past history and everything else. And there was the argument is that there was too much subjectivity in it. But there was the personal aspect of getting to know the individual and getting to know the case and getting to know their criminal history. And they would make the report to the courts, and then the courts would take that into consideration when they were either holding them or releasing them or whatever, or setting bail. Now it's all pretty much done by computer. It's just data input into a computer and using, quote unquote, these evidence-based practices. The reports come out and probation gives it to the courts, and the courts look at it and say, all right, well, we're going to release them. Perfect example, just recently down in Tulare County with the 2 suspects arrested with how many, I don't know how many 100,000 pills of fentanyl pills they were arrested for. And the next day they were released on their OR because they had no criminal history and there was no evidence of a flight risk. Well, of course they didn't have a criminal history. They're cartel members, they're mules. They never got caught before. They finally got caught, and there was no evidence of a flight history because they didn't say anything, and the judge couldn't put 2 and 2 together and say, well, wait a minute, they're not even from around here. Of course they're going to leave. Just put that all aside and let them out. And they're gone. They're gone. But then you have other instances where, under the same circumstances, that individuals have been released, the courts have released them, and then they go right back out and commit another crime. because
Right.
there's no accountability.
Well, another good example that just happened a couple of months ago was that gang fight down just what, a block and a half from the Capitol, on
Yeah,
K Street down there, that ended up having 6 people get killed.
yeah,
You look at the suspects that they caught, and they all had records as long as your arm,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they're on the streets, and they're using illegal guns,
yeah.
to shoot up the streets. And at the same time, of course, what is the legislature? How do they react? They continue to push their easy on crime laws, but then they go after law-abiding gun owners,
Absolutely.
who aren't part of the problem.
Right. Absolutely.
There is so many gun laws pending, either have just been signed by our governor or are going to be to his desk here on August 1st or shortly thereafter when they come back from recess. I mean, that's a separate interview, because there's a ton of stuff
Yeah.
that is coming down the pike right now that only impacts law-abiding gun owners who aren't out there shooting up the streets. It just doesn't make any sense. Letting criminals that have got a proven track record of using illegal firearms, violent crimes, and putting them back on the street, especially under the guise of propositions that are called the Safe Neighborhoods Whatever Act. It's like, I honestly believe that the typical California citizen is a good person that doesn't want to see bad criminals on the streets.
Absolutely.
Right? I really believe that.
Absolutely.
But if they just take the time to look at what's happening, either what their legislators are doing down at the Capitol or what's being put on the ballot, and hold them accountable for this.
I've talked to many people. I've talked to scores of people who, when I explain Prop 47 and what it did, they'll bring up issues on that's going on. This guy, I saw a guy in Walmart the other day walk right out with a cartload of stuff. I said, yeah, Prop 47. What was that? Well, back in 2014 or whatever, you voted on passed Proposition 47. Well, what was it? They don't even remember it. And I said, well, it was called the Safe Neighborhood and Schools Act. Oh, I don't really remember it. I said, well, you probably voted yes on it because it sounded so good. Yeah, you're right. I probably did. And then I talked to a lot of other folks too that during in 2020, during the riots that was going on, many individuals came into our local gun stores to buy guns. And they would, I'm buying a gun for the first time in my life. Oh, well, great. What are you looking for? You're going to get all the training? Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So they finally pick out a gun and everything. And then it comes time to walk out the door and they say, okay, well, we'll see you in 10 days. Well, what do you mean? I bought it. I said, no, you got to wait. There's a 10-day cooling off period in California. Well, what's that mean? And he explained it to him. Well, who in the heck voted for that? Well, you guys did. You voted people that put all that stuff in place. So anyway, no, you're right. You're right. Most folks, they're not getting into the weeds in their ballots. They're not getting informed. Or worse than that, Bill, they're not voting. They're just not voting. People need to get informed and they need to vote. It's one of our most sacred duties that we have as a U.S. citizen, to vote.
Right.
Vote.
So totally agree with you on that. You mentioned people walking out of Walmart with a shopping cart full of stuff. I've heard stories after stories after stories about that kind of stuff. And the Walmart employees, they don't even try to stop them. It's like, it's not worth it.
No, and that's another issue. They'll tout the folks that are on the other side that are saying this is all good stuff. They'll say, yeah, but crime's going down. Crime's going down. No, it's not. People aren't reporting it. The actual reporting numbers are going down because people are no longer reporting it. You talk to the Retailers Association, you talk to your local businesses and retail stores, they'll say, yeah, it wasn't nothing. I didn't even report it. So that's why the reports are going down. They're failing to report. Right. I got a funny story. When a couple years after Prop 47 had passed, my deputies got called to our local Walmart out here of a shoplifter who was one of their frequent flyers. When they got there, he had already left, and they didn't find him. That was earlier in the day. A few hours later, they got called for another one. They go there, and it's another individual that loss prevention did catch coming out the door, detained for us. We were there talking with the individual when the loss prevention officer looked up and said, hey, there's the guy from this morning. and had a shopping cart full of stolen stuff, pushing it out the door. One of my deputies walked up to try and detain him, and the fight was on. It just went nuts. This guy went nuts. They ended up wrestling around. By then, a couple more deputies and a sergeant had showed up, and the guy's screaming, "It's just a misdemeanor. It's just a misdemeanor. It's just a misdemeanor." And my sergeant, God bless him, said, "You're not going to jail for the theft, the shoplifting. You're going to jail for fighting with my deputies." And he said, "Oh, but you can't take me to jail." He goes, "Well, why can't I take you to jail?" He said, "Because I have a severe mental disability." He said, "Oh, really? What is it?" He says, I suffer from multiple personality disorder. I need to go to the hospital instead." He said, "Well, really? Well, how many personalities do you have?" He says, doctors have said I have 3 separate distinct personalities." And my sergeant said, "That's fantastic. All 3 of you guys are going to jail."
It's funny, but it's not funny,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
It's just unbelievable. You speak about probation periods and misdemeanors. There was some legislation passed, I believe it was 2020, Assembly Bill, I think it was 1950. Does that ring a bell at all?
Vaguely, so many.
That's the, well, I'll tell you, this one's played a big role for me because I deal with wildlife issues down at the Capitol, right? And if you look at the Fish and Game Code, I mean, most of the violations in there are misdemeanors, right? And so what this bill did, it reduced maximum probation periods for all misdemeanors whose violations don't have a specific probation period called out in the code from 3 years to 1 year, right? And that's created all kinds of havoc because basically it said pretty much any wildlife related crime, worst case, you're going to get 1 year probation. That's it. So we actually twice now, because that bill was passed in 2020, in 2021 and in 2022, we introduced legislation would have increased the probation period for 4 select really serious wildlife violations back to 3 years. We couldn't even get the bill heard. We went to the chairman of the committee that was supposed to hear it and said, "Look, we picked 4. I mean, there's countless wildlife violations in the Fish and Game Code that AB 1950 impacts, but we're picking just the 4 nastiest ones because we really need a bigger hammer on these, right?" And their response was, "So are you saying that wildlife crime is more serious than crimes against humans?" It's like,
unbelievable.
No, we're not. But we are saying that you never should have reduced the misdemeanor maximum probation period from 3 to 1 on those either, right?
Yeah.
It just,
They didn't do any other ones either. I think it was last year, the last couple of years, they tried to fix Prop 47 and they won't even entertain it.
yeah, it's just amazing. And if you really break down all the crimes that are out there, I mean, and you look at who's committing them, and it's people that for one reason or another should have been either behind bars or at a mental institution, like the gentleman that had all 3 of them should have gone to jail, right? And it's just not happening. But they'll focus in on law-abiding gun owners as being part of the problem. And
yes, sir.
I don't know. The stuff I see go on, the stuff that you see go on, I think if the average general public saw that stuff, they'd go, "What are we thinking?"
Yep, I agree. People need to vote. Get informed and vote, please.
Right.
Please.
Right, absolutely. And not only when it comes, like I mentioned earlier, not only when it comes to propositions that get thrown on the ballot, but also when it comes to who you're selecting to represent you in the state assembly or in the state senate, right? I mean, get to know, just exactly how they think. And if they do get elected, hold them accountable, right?
Right.
The stuff I see every day, the stuff you see every day, it's like
crazy.
Unbelievable.
It's getting worse every day. I keep waiting for the pendulum to stop swinging.
Who would have thunk? I mean, go back 5 years, go back 10 years, and if I would have said, "John, here's what we're going to be dealing with in 2022, you would have hauled me off to the mental institution.
Oh.
right? It's just,
Right.
it's the
Yeah.
whole thing's just unbelievable. Again, Sheriff, it's actually an honor to live in your county. You're doing a great job here in El Dorado County. We could use a whole bunch more just like you throughout the state, that's for sure. So
Thank you.
So thank you for keeping us safe and keeping El Dorado County about as sane as you possibly can. Thanks for your time today. And I do want to have you on again sometime very, very soon, because there is a ton of stuff that we didn't even scratch upon today.
My honor. My honor. The more people we can educate, the better we are.
That's what it's all about, is educating. Like you say, get them out there, educate them on what they're voting on, and get them to vote. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in today. Check us out on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, and on our website at www.theoutdoorview.org.